Welcome. Today we've got Mike Mulvey, pitching coach at D3 Powerhouse from Marietta College. Mike, appreciate you spending some time.
Thanks for having me on, Marty. Looking forward to it.
So we could spend about the first 20 minutes of this interview going through all the Marietta College accolades, 6 national championships, a bunch of All-Americans, pros. I'm sure you just showed me the camera around the room. You've got trophies laying everywhere, a lot of hardware there at Marietta College. But you were there for a couple special years where a couple back-to-back national champions. That doesn't happen very often. Talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's easy with the praising. I was if there were 25 guys that made the postseason roster, I was probably 25. So it was looking back on it. It's one of those things you don't necessarily realize how special it is when you're in it. But the further away I've gotten removed from that, it's kind of shown a different light on it with just how difficult that is and how close we've come a couple times here. But just to think back on those days was really fortunate. Deciding to come here changed the trajectory of my life. And the coaching staff at the time and the guys that I played with were still very close, and we talk with each other on a fairly regular basis. So it's extremely special to have been a part of the program during that time.
Sure. So walk me through. So you played there at Marietta College. Walk me through kind of like how you got to be the pitching coach there at Marietta College. Kind of walk me through your background.
The coaching side of things was honestly a late decision for me. I think like most high school athletes, when you're thinking about what you want to major in or what you want to do in college, for me, it was I wanted to be around sports. I wanted to stay involved in some capacity. And for me, the first thought was through athletic training. So that's what I decided to come to Marietta to do. And to be completely honest, my study habits were not good enough. I kind of learned the hard way that was not going to be what my future was in. And thankfully, at the time, the college was then transitioning to adding sport management as a major. It had been a minor for a few years to that point. But going into my sophomore year, it transitioned into a major. So it was a little bit of a segue for me to transition into that. And like I said, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a part of a private facility or be a sport agent, or there were quite a few things that were kind of going through my mind at that time. And as I kind of got into my senior year, that's when I was like, maybe the coaching side of things is something I want to get into. And the reason for me was just the experience that I had here. Like I said, those playing days and the how the 4 years as a student kind of changed me for the better. So I wanted to be able to have that type of effect and hopefully pass that on to other student athletes as well. So that's kind of what pushed me into the coaching side of things. Was fortunate after graduation to get to move back to Pittsburgh. That's where I'm from. And there was an organization at the time who had a couple of former Marietta guys who were coaching at that time. So it was a pretty easy transition to do the travel ball and lesson side of thing. So did that for a year. And it was perfect for me, honestly. It allowed me to create the philosophies that every coach, has early on to try to struggle with, honestly, but doing it with, 10-year-olds and 14-year-olds and 16-year-olds was honestly a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because like I said, it was not necessarily a life or death situation. Nobody's necessarily caring about the wins and losses at that time. So I could figure some stuff out, make some mistakes and learn from it. But during that time, I was also an assistant coach for Vincentian Academy, who has since then actually closed its doors, but was the pitching coach there, did that for a year, and then was fortunate enough to have a position open up at Denison University, where Coach Deegan, the head coach there, played a Marietta, coached here for many years, was an assistant coach on those national championship teams. And then also his assistant at the time, Kyle Lindquist, was a teammate of mine as well. He's now with the Cleveland Guardians. So it was a pretty easy fit, right, to be able to go from, the non-collegiate coaching side of things to being at Denison. Was there for a year, and then transitioned from that into a GA position at Misericordia University, and coached worked for Pete Egbert, their current head guy. And many Marietta fans know those guys as the ones that ended our season last year. So it was a little bit of an interesting super regional for me, it's playing against those guys, having a graduate degree from there, and obviously happy for them and the success that they had. But did that for 2 years. And then unfortunately a position opened up at Muskingum University here in the Ohio Athletic Conference. So was able to go from the GA position to a full-time role as the head assistant recruiting coordinator for Greg Thompson, the head coach at the time. Did that for 2 years, and then this position opened up down here, and it was one of those things that it couldn't pass on to come down and coach at the alma mater, and obviously the caliber of the program was extremely exciting as well too. So that's brought me to here. This will be my 5th season as the pitching coach here at Marietta.
So tell me about the changes over the last 5 years. You guys got like probably the best facility going right now here, especially in our region. Tell me about some of the changes and some of the things you guys have implemented there.
Yeah, and I think to talk about the facilities, you've got to talk about the history and the alumni base first and foremost. It starts back with Coach Shalley and what he was able to do, through the 70s and 80s, and we're very fortunate to have the alumni base that we have that was able to support us in the recent field renovations. It's a phenomenal facility. Our guys love showing up to the ballpark every day. Coach Brewer's a pretty old school guy, and I think it took us about one practice to realize that the turf was a little bit of a game changer. So it's been phenomenal. Like I said, the amount of development that takes place, the practices and kind of what we do hasn't necessarily changed a ton, but it's just allows us to have a little bit more of a set schedule. And guys don't have tarp duty. They don't know what that's like. They don't have to check the board or the voicemail, and they're a little spoiled from that regard. But it's just allowed us to kind of streamline the development. And like I said, I think the proof is in the pudding. That the past the COVID year was the first year that we had the program, so it was a little bit of a patience lesson for us to kind of sit and watch the thing every day without being able to play on it. But since we've had the field in, we've gone to the regional championship, World Series, and then Super Regionals. So I think it's pretty obvious the impact that it's had within our program.
Yeah, it's got to be impressive to recruits coming in.
They love it.
So talk to me a little bit about roster size. About how many guys do you carry, and then within that subset, how many pitchers are normally rostered up there?
Sure. A typical roster size for us is anywhere from the high 30s to mid 40s. I think we would prefer less. And Coach Brewer always says that the back-to-back national championship years, we had 32 guys on the roster. So if we could get to something of that size, we would be completely for it. But you got to make sure that it's the right 32 guys, or however many it might be. But in the fall, the roster is typically a little bit bigger. Usually it'll be a little closer to the 50 mark. And then as we go through, there's a natural attrition rate with college athletics. I don't think that people necessarily like to discuss it or talk about it, but it's the reality of the situation. It's extremely difficult to play high level college athletics, or just college athletics in general, right? There's a lot on your plate, whether it's academically, socially, or from the baseball side of things. So there's usually a few guys every year who will hang it up, whether it's not, it's a much too much for them, or they can see that maybe they're not necessarily going to be the one that's getting all the playing time. So there is a little bit of a decrease in roster size from when we start the fall to what we get to in the springtime. But from the pitching side of things, we typically carry 18 to 23, 24 arms. And I know that might seem kind of high, but the thing that's a little bit different for us compared to maybe some other places is the two-way side of things. We have quite a few two-way players on our roster. I think last year, I think our pitching depth chart was at 22, and 11 of those guys were two-way guys. And we've obviously had some success with it here the past couple of years, with Trent Valentine being an All-American for us on the mound, and also playing center field for us. Brett Carson had a phenomenal year last year for us as well as a pitch outfield guy. So the balance between that is something that we've had some success with. And the reason that we like it is it shows your athleticism, right? To be able to do at a high level, to do both at a high level. But when we get to the postseason, the NCAA limits how many guys that we can take, right? How many guys that we can travel with. So we're limited to 25 guys. If you can pitch at a high level and play a position, that's a 2-for-1 deal for us. That's we can take one guy versus two guys, which allows us to have a little bit more freedom with some of the decisions on the roster and what we need, what our strengths and weaknesses are. So although the number for pitchers in general might be a little bit higher, like I said, we do have quite a few two-way guys that will pitch and play first, or pitch and play third, or pitch in outfield. And we've actually had a pitch catch guy in the past. That's a little bit more difficult to manage. but it's not something that we're opposed to, and those are typically what the numbers look like.
Sure. I'm sure that's ringing in some guys' ears because there's a lot of guys that like that opportunity, and a lot of schools, they frown upon that, or it's not it's not a likely scenario. Can you talk a little bit about your schedule? Normally like a D1 schedule, you're playing like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so you've got 3 starters there. You're playing a couple midweek games. Can you talk about how you guys, when you get into conference play, what your schedule's like, and how quickly it seems like you carry a lot of pitchers, but real quick, you've got a lot of arms in use.
Yeah, the depth is really necessary. I think if you look at any college, stat sheets from previous years, and all of this stuff is accessible, right? Parents, kids, you can look at this, right? You can see who's playing, what grade they're in. So from the roster side of things, you can get a pretty good idea as to who's coming back and who's not. But I would say that most college programs have 10 to 12 arms that throw pretty consistently. For us, we try to have kind of a 4-man starting rotation, and then you've got your 4 to 6 bullpen guys, and then there's 2 or 3 guys who will be the up 10, down 10 kind of situational type arms. But as far as the schedule goes within the Ohio Athletic Conference, we have 10 schools in the OAC, so we're playing 9 other opponents. 7 of those opponents are weekend doubleheaders, and then there are 2 midweek doubleheaders as well. So there's going to be need for, like I said, the 3rd and 4th starter throughout the course of the week. So typically those games are on Saturdays, and with us playing 18 conference scheduled games, we still have to schedule 22 non-conference games. We're allowed 40 games at the Division III level, and we try to play 40 every single year. That's one of the things that I think Coach Brewer has done a phenomenal job with the past few years, is just our strength of schedule and the teams that we play. We're pretty consistently top 5, top 10 in the country every year for strength of schedule. That's a little bit in part to the teams that we're playing in non-conference, but also just within the strength of the OAC as well. So typically 2 games on Saturday, and a lot of those weeks as well, we'll have a Sunday non-conference game, whether it's a school from the NCAC or the PAC or other regional schools in this area, and then kind of flip to the next week. We're going to have some midweek games sprinkled in there as well. So it's pretty consistent for us, where we're playing 3 to 4, if not 5 games a week throughout the course of the season. So the depth from what you need from the pitching side of things is extremely important.
You guys have a JV program? Do you play like some junior college games, or how is that part of how you guys do things now?
We do. Yeah, we do. And I know sometimes that can be frowned upon. Nobody likes to hear the JV side of things when you're talking about college baseball. But I always kind of revert back to, when you were a freshman in high school, did you play varsity? And if you're an exceptional player, then you may say yes. But in more times than not, when kids are playing in high school ball, they're playing on their freshman team, or they're playing on the JV program. So the key that we try to put emphasis on is being able to develop players while you still win. And I think that the teams and the programs that can do that successfully are the ones who you see continually year in and year out, that are competing for conference championships, that are competing for regionals, super regionals, World Series, those types of places. So from the JV side of things, we will play a schedule, and it's not necessarily it's not 2 separate programs. I mean, like I said, our roster is our roster. If we've got 40 guys, those guys are working out every single day together. They're practicing together. There's no segmenting as to who is who. There's not different practices. But outside of our varsity schedule, we will try to play 15 to 20 JV games every single year. And it's for the development side of things. It's for if you're the 3rd or 4th string catcher, so that by the time your number's called, you're ready. Kids talk about having an opportunity and being able to compete. Every single day for us is an opportunity to impress our coaching staff. And the schedule that we play, we highly value. There have been guys in the past that maybe didn't play the first 10 to 12 games of the year, but because of some of the success that they've had in some of those JV games, they'll get their shot, and it's on them to kind of take it and roll with it and do with it what they will.
If you look back at all the guys, like there's so many pro guys that have come from there, all Americans. I bet you all those guys were JV guys at one point in time, earning their stripes. And
Not,
without
not
that,
even
you're
just a
sitting
little
on
bit.
the bench, right? You're not pitching.
Right.
There's not a good option, right?
If you go, a month between your outings or a month and a half between the last time you pitched, you're not going to have a lot of success, right? We're firm believers that this is a game that you have to play to get better at. So along with the things that we do in practice to replicate game-like situations, the JV side of things is extremely important for us. When you look at, so we had a lot of success in the 2020 season, or excuse me, 2022 season. It was a very veteran group. We had a few guys who were using that fifth year. I think we had 13 seniors. There was a lot of older guys that had played college baseball for quite a few years and had a lot of experience under their belt. And it was a phenomenal group, right? It was a ton of fun. We had a lot of success, and we felt like we had some really good younger talent within the program at that time, where in many years, they may have had more opportunities. But because of just the situation and the roster dynamic, it wasn't meant to be that year. And then, fast forward to last year, a lot of those guys were gone, right? But we still had quite a few new guys in the lineup, and we're still able to have some success. And like I said, it's the ability to develop while you win. And with our JV schedule, we play a pretty competitive JV schedule. You mentioned some junior colleges. We'll play Potomac State. Those guys are a phenomenal, JUCO program in this area. Division II wise, we'll go up to Ashland and play Coach Shalley. Seton Hill has a junior varsity team that we'll play all. So the teams that we're playing are very, very competitive, and we're going to be seeing good baseball during those games.
Sure. Can you talk a little bit about what an average incoming freshman class looks like, and how many pitchers are normally part of that freshman class? I know it changes every year, but you got a
Sure.
ballpark.
And just with being non-scholarship, it does make it a little bit more difficult to kind of budget what that looks like. But a typical incoming freshman class for us is usually anywhere from 15 to 20 players. I mean, it's somewhere within that range. And from the arms side of things, we're probably looking at 6 to 8 that are typically in that group. And again, not all of those guys are POs. More times than not, we've got quite a few two-way guys that will be a shortstop pitch or outfield pitch that are kind of in that mixture as well. But usually 15 to 20 is somewhere within that range. And like I said, 6 to 8 is a pretty safe number. Sometimes it can be a tick or two higher in a given year, but that's typically what it looks like for us.
Can you talk about in the recruiting process to end up with 6 or 8 guys? What's that look like, 2 years earlier as you guys are out looking at juniors? How many guys are you typically trying to look at or perhaps target to end up with that, with that freshman class coming in there? Is there a number that, hey, on our board, we like to have, we got about 30 guys and we're going to try to get 6 or 8 of those guys at the end. Is there some ballparks that you can talk about that you've
Sure.
had success with? Hey, this is a pretty good model for us.
And I think the number's probably going to be higher than people would expect. Typically, the return rate for us when it comes to the recruiting side of things is usually 10 to 20%. So as we go through the recruiting side of things, when we see younger players, if you're somebody who's a freshman, or sophomore in high school, if we think you're a pretty talented player, we're going to make sure that we make note of that in our recruiting database. It's something that our entire staff has access to, so that we can log and track, where we saw certain players, what their measurables were, how they performed, what we liked, what we didn't like. So we have track of all of that for every single guy that's in our program. So we might not reach out to those guys right away, because the reality is if you're a freshman or a sophomore and you're a pretty talented player, right, and you're starting to get college interest, you're probably not going to be a Division III player. Not always, but in a lot of cases, you may get some scholarship money to go to a Division II or Division I, if you're being recruited and you're that talented at that time. So majority of the recruiting and evaluation for us, the kids that we recruit that we typically get, it's between the summer of when their junior year ends to their senior year begins. So June and July, we're on the road. Myself and Coach DeColvey, we're seeing games. We're going to showcases. We're trying to gather our call sheet is what we call it, with all of the kids that we think can be successful and play at Marietta College. That number is typically around 275 to 300, right? So it's ballpark. That's typically what the call sheet looks like. So, and it's at this point in time, right? It's August 15th right now. Summer's kind of winding down. Football's starting up. Maybe some kids are taking a few weeks off before fall baseball begins. So this is when Coach DeColvey and I we're on the phone, making 4 or 5 calls a day, if not more, to the kids who are on that list. And those calls are just general, right? Just to see what your interests are, what you're looking for. Are we something that you may be interested in, whether it's from the academic side of things, baseball, and hopefully both. So we will try to reach out to every single player on that call sheet. Sometimes kids will commit before we can get to them. Sometimes kids are not interested. That number dwindles down as time goes on for a very variety of reasons. But from those calls, typically we will get 75 to 100 visits every year. Okay, so those are families that we've seen your son. We think that there's somebody who can be successful at Marietta College baseball. We invite them to campus for a visit, and it's a little bit more of a formal setting. So like I said, 75 to 100 of those throughout the months of, like I said, now until typically December. The Division III timeline has somewhat got a little bit more sped up. In 10 to 15 years ago, we would still be recruiting kids and still be having visits in January and February. And we still do, right? There are still kids who are some late bloomers, or maybe we didn't see them and then we see them at some point at a late camp or something in the winter months. But majority, right? 80 to 85, 90% of our visits take place from September 1 through December 1. That's kind of when we have majority of our families on campus. They go through the application process, the financial aid process, and we have a pretty good idea by the first of the year what majority of our class is going to look like. So around 300 kids that we reach out to, 75 to 100 visits, and that will get us to 15 to 20 commits, somewhere in that range.
Do you remember your visit? I can remember the old man driving me around in the van, right? Given the talk. What was who did your visit? What was it like?
So there, it was myself, and then there was another catcher from Maryland who was on campus that day as well, sitting across the table from Coach Brewer. I can remember I wasn't a highly touted recruit. I was maybe a low 80s pitcher from the right hand side, 81, 82. So it wasn't. It's funny, right? Being on the other side of the fence, you look back and say like, oh, would I have recruited myself if I saw myself playing right now? And honestly, I don't know. Wasn't the most athletic, but just loved the game of baseball and wanted to do anything that I could to win. And being here, being surrounded by the teammates that I had at that time was a huge benefit to me. But I do remember the visit. Yeah, I can remember sitting across the table from Coach Brewer. I said I remember the other recruit that was there with me. And I just remember at the end of the day thinking, if this works out financially, this is exactly where I want to go. It's done. It's a done deal. So thankfully.
So you talked about the recruiting timeline with the D1 changes and that August 1st date with them not being able to. Do you see that impacting or maybe pushing that timeline back? Because I just see there's going to be all this activity, right? Because normally it's that pecking order that happens. And now that they're not going to be able to seal those deals until August 1st with like actual commitments and stuff like that. So do you see it like playing around with those dates a little bit?
Yeah, I do. I would say that it allows for maybe a better caliber player to be in the mix a little bit longer. So for us, it's a good thing, at least so far in my experience. I think we've had some kids who have shown interest that maybe in previous years at this point would be off the board. But the chips are going to fall where they lay. I think you're going to start to see it here over the next month or so with some more kids who are going to make some commitments to some scholarship schools. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, I think it has kind of pushed it back a little bit. The next few weeks will still be pretty busy for us. There probably are some more players that are in the mix now than maybe some previous years. And I do think it will benefit us. But at the end of the day, if you're a Division I baseball player or you're a scholarship Division II guy, if you're able to play at that level, I still think that you'll end up being there or finding some type of opportunity at that level.
What about the transfer portal? How's that impacted you guys there either positively or negatively?
It's funny. The last few years, we've kind of said like we're not really a big transfer school, but I think some of the best success that we've had in the last 3 years has been through transfers. So COVID kind of started it, right? And for us, we had some guys that reached out to us, and for us, typically with the recruiting side of things with transfers, we don't have a ton of success when it comes to seeing somebody in the portal or seeing something on social media that they're posting and us reaching out to them. We don't typically see a ton of success through that. It's more so the guys who have done a little bit of homework, know who we are, know what we're about, have reached out to us, and kind of explained their situation with what it is that they're looking for. Those are the guys that we typically have success with. I mean, so looking back at the COVID year, Zach Boyd was a transfer for us that we picked up, who was a phenomenal player for us for the 2 years he was with us. And then also Turner Hill, right? Turner Hill, Brett Carson was another player as well. So I'm probably going to miss a couple here as we go, but we've had plenty of guys the last 2 to 3 years who have been really successful for us. And it's not a lot, I say plenty of guys, but it's been maybe 1 or 2 a year that have reached out and decided to come in. Zach Boyd and Turner Hill were at the same time, and it was funny.
That's a pretty good combo.
It was, yeah, we kind of lucked out with that one. It was a fall scrimmage, right? So we're playing on a weekend, and I think there were a couple Division II schools that were coming to just borrow the facility for the day to kind of play as well. So we were finishing up with our scrimmage, and there were back-to-back plays to end a game where somebody Turner made a diving catch in right field. That was a phenomenal full extension catch, and then the very next play to end the game, Boyd robbed a home run in left field. And our Coach Brewer looked at Damian Yenzi, our third baseman at the time, and was like, "What do you think of that?" He's like, "I'm glad they don't play third base." So we've had some success with it. It's not a ton of success, like I said. It's more so guys reaching out to us that have done their homework, that know who we are, that know what it is that they're looking for, and it's our strengths and needs as well too. I think our pitching staff right now is in a pretty good spot. We didn't really actively look for arms, this summer. The needs for us going into this past summer were outfield and then middle infield. Those were kind of the two positions that we were trying to at least find a guy or two at. It worked out for us that we picked up a couple outfield transfers, and we're still kind of at the point where we're looking for a middle infielder. It's getting a little bit late on the clock, and there's.
So talk about that a little bit, because I can remember Coach Shalley talking about, man, it all depends on like what year you were born and what the needs are, right? So it's amazing. Some parents think, hey, if I'm really good, all these schools are going to want me. But just like you just said, hey, if you've got certain needs, you're trying to fill needs, right? Can you talk about that when you guys go out recruiting, filling those needs?
Yeah, it's and I think it may be maybe a little bit of a vicious way to look at it. I don't know, but the reality of recruiting is we're trying to recruit players that we think are better than what we have, right? And maybe our players don't want to hear that. Maybe it's a little bit of a reality check. But when you're recruiting, we're at least at Marietta College, we're not trying to recruit guys to come to our program to be bench players. We're recruiting you because we think you're good enough to get on the field, and maybe because we think you're better than some of the current guys that we have. So the need side of thing and just your positional strengths and weaknesses is pretty important to it. And I think you kind of see that a little bit more at the scholarship level with what they have to be able to offer towards kids, because arms are typically the first to go from the money side of things. But there have been instances where the kid could be a really good player, or we think that he could still be pretty good for us, but we just the roster's kind of full at that point, right? We feel like if you're not better than what we currently have, we're probably not going to say yes.
So let's talk about the scholarship side of it for a little bit. Obviously at Division III, you're not giving athletic scholarships, but there's a really nice financial packages that you can set in front of families to make it comparable with some of the other offers that they're having. So can you talk a little bit about how you approach that? I mean, not, when you're battling, other schools and conferences that can throw out some athletic money, but maybe the package isn't as good.
Yeah, and it's the number one reason why we lose majority of the recruits that we go for. Typically, the first thing that I try to tell the kids is, the sticker price is not what you're going to be paying, right? Before you have a heart attack and pass out on the phone, very, very rarely do families pay a full board for a lot of private education, whether it's Marietta or not. So we do have scholarship packages. We're a non-athletic scholarship Division III school, so everything for us is either academic based or need based, and a lot of this stuff is accessible through admissions websites. You can, if you're looking at a handful of schools. You can go to their admissions websites to see what type of academic scholarships you would qualify for based on your GPA or your standardized test scores. A lot of schools since COVID have kind of transitioned to test optional. So if you've got a pretty good GPA, but maybe your ACT or your SAT is not quite as good, you don't have to submit it, right? You can stick with whatever's going to boost your profile from the academic side of things with admissions, and hopefully get you some more money. But the way our scholarships are tiered is if you have a 4.0, you're going to qualify for $24,000. And these numbers kind of change from year to year, but going into the 2023, 2024 year, this is what they are currently. So it's $24,000 for a 4.0. That's our maximum scholarship. Now, with that, being a 4.0, we host a scholarship day, typically in February, late January, early February, where we will invite back all of our top academic students that are showing interest at that time. So all of the kids that have a 4.0 will get invited back to scholarship day, and it's a competition, right? You have the chance to win. And it varies from year to year, but it's 4 to 5 full tuition scholarships, and there's one student every year who will get full board, everything, room and board, tuition, and not have to pay a dime. So the academic side of things is very important. It not only shows us a little bit, as to kind of what your habits are and how well you'll do in college, but from the money side of things, it can be a game changer.
Yeah, when I'm talking to, or go ahead.
No, that's okay. So the next tier down from there is a 3.99 to a 3.65, and that package is $23,000, and then a 3.64 to a 3.30 is $21,000.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
There are a couple that'll drop down from there, but I think people are very surprised with that. When we talk to kids and they say, "Yo, I've got a 3.2 or a 3.4," and it's like you're going to get $21,000 or $23,000 right off the bat. I think kids are a little bit surprised that some of that money is available. We encourage guys, when you're looking at us versus other places, go through the process, go through the application process, file the FAFSA, because when it's all said and done and the packages come out, I think it's going to be a little bit closer than you might think. If
when I'm talking with parents, and I'm telling them, hey, these are the things you need to kind of look for to kind of, try to find the fit of what you're doing, and money's not on there. And they always ask, well, listen, you see how much these schools cost? Why is money not as I'm trying to find out what schools? And I said, listen, you don't know that till the end, right? Find some places that you like until you sit across and like you said, fill out the FAFSA and find out what they can offer. Man, a school you could cross off your list because, hey, that costs a lot of money to go to school there. That could be your best package.
It could be. And like I said, the need-based side of things is something that the kids will find out late as well too. Yeah, I mean, we've usually within the OAC, if you can have competing packages from schools that are within the same conference or similar profile schools. So we're a smaller school, private education. If there are other schools that are similar to us, we're going to be pretty competitive with them. Now, however, if it is a junior college or something that it's a state school that has a cheaper price, pretty significantly cheaper price off the bat, obviously those guys we're not necessarily going to compete with them from the financial side of things. But like I said, I think people are more surprised that the numbers are typically a little bit better than they would think. It's just a matter of making sure you go through the process. A lot of schools now have started to have cost calculators through their website, which you can kind of get a general sense of. Now, there's a little bit of a give and take to that. We encourage families to do the cost calculator after they've filed the FAFSA, because typically you once you know what your ISER or your EFC is going to be from the FAFSA, it's a little bit of a more concrete, accurate number. If you don't have that information, the number's probably going to be a little bit more on the higher side, which can scare some folks away.
Yeah, and bite the bullet, because you're going to have to fill that out sooner or later. So that's with two boys going through the college system, man, that's a pain in the butt, but you got to do it. So
yeah, I think I heard some talk about how they want to throw their computer out the window when they're doing it. Yeah. But it's kind of a necessary evil, and even through doing it, you may qualify for some other additional types of aid that without doing it, it's not even going to be an option. So we encourage everybody to do it, and just go through the process, see what the number is going to be at the end, and then make your decision from there.
So we talked a little bit about transfers. What about junior college recruiting? I know typically in the past, for you guys? It was more like spot, like add a guy here or there if need be. What's your guys' current approach to JUCO guys, and how do you guys do that?
It's pretty similar to the transfer side of things. It's more so, and coaches at the junior college level have done a phenomenal job of making sure that the names of their kids get out with kind of who they are and how to reach out to them. And I think why it can be so appealing is just the numbers side of things, right? There are stats to look at to be able to see how successful a particular player has been. So that's kind of the negative, if you will, towards kids who are in high school right now when you're looking at transfers and junior college players. It's just because they've got a little bit more proof, right? There's a little bit more of a body of work there to be able to know that there's a little less risk involved with recruiting that particular player. But for us, it's very similar to transfers. It's what our needs are. More so, guys who reach out to us. Currently in the program, we have one player who's a junior college player, and he's actually from El Paso, Texas. So it was a situation where we had a couple of our players who were playing in college summer leagues in the area. One of them being a catcher within our program. He had known, that the kid was going to be looking for a place to play, and he caught him for a few games. He said, "Hey, I think the kid's pretty good. You should take a look at him." And that's basically what started that conversation. So, kind of a recommendation from a player within our program. But there are a variety of ways that those guys can get on our radar, whether it's from the college coach themselves, from a summer coach, or some type of mutual connection. But it is more times than not similar to the transfer process for us, where they've done a little bit of homework and they kind of know who we are and what they're looking for.
So as you're out recruiting pitchers, do you guys have body types that you've had success with in the past that you're looking for, kind of like typical? Obviously, you get all sorts of kind of different types of guys, but is there some models that you're looking at that you've had success with?
Yeah, I think it's kind of obvious, when you look at bigger framed pitchers, those are obviously a little bit more attractive just because typically their bodies are able to sustain it throughout the course of the 4 years, or maybe go a little longer. But like I said, since we can't offer athletic money, we can't be that particular. If we were looking for a specific body type only, that recruiting list of names would probably shrink to be a much smaller list than what we would want it to be. So it's a little bit less about what your physicality is, and obviously again, those we look at those things. Those things are definitely important to us, but it's also the stuff that you've got. How well you compete. Can you field your position? Can you control the running game? There's quite a few other things that go into that. We would like for pitchers to be able to carry their weight kind of in their trunk and in their waist. Those guys typically have a little bit more oomph to them. But it's not always a cookie cutter mold. It's not always the case that we can get just those guys. And I think that's kind of the beauty of recruiting is kind of seeing through that. I think if you looked at a college roster, with let's just say Division III for that instance, if you looked at our starting lineup, and this is true for many Division III schools, I think you would be impressed with the physicality and the size of the players that are on the field, right? They're 17 or 18-year-old kids who are transitioning into being mature physical adults. The biggest difference for us in the recruiting process when we're looking at a kid who goes to maybe a higher Division I or Division II school versus the Division III route is just the physicality early on. Those players that are signing with Power 5 schools are typically just physically mature sooner. So it's kind of on us in the recruiting process to see through that. What do we think this guy can look like in 2 to 3 years after he gets within our program, within our strength and conditioning, within the throwing program, and it becomes a little bit more serious for him, more of a lifestyle. What can this guy look like in 2, 3, 4 years? So I think there's less of a difference between guys who are in college at Division III and Division I when they're playing in school. But from the recruiting side of things, there is a difference there. The guys that go at that level are typically a little bit more, physically mature at that time.
What about velocity? When you go, what's like the minimum, or do you kind of have like a baseline floor? For me to go watch a kid, I like to see at least this from the right side or this from the left side, because I know to compete at the next level, you need at least some sort of baseline velocity, or guys you're not going to get respected. And then it doesn't matter how good of off speed stuff you have, if you can't have respect with the fastball, guys, it's going to be tough for guys to compete.
Yeah, and I know velocity is the big thing, and for a reason, right? If the ball is coming in firmer, it's harder to hit. So when we recruit guys, typically from the right hand side, we're looking for guys who are in the low to mid 80s, and if we can get higher than that, that's obviously exciting for us. Lefties are a little bit more different. The lefties we can get a little bit less on. If those guys are low 80s to high 70s guys. And again, the projectability piece plays a role in that as well. If it's somebody who's maybe a lefty out of high school who's 81, 82, but mechanically he's pretty sound. There's some physicality there. We think that his arm action is a loose, easy arm action. He's not a max effort guy. We think that that's somebody who, like I said, in 2 to 3 years could be a mid to upper guy. Well, and we don't necessarily tell recruits that we think you're going to be this, but based on what we're seeing in our experience, we think that you could potentially put on a few more as you go through this year. So it varies, like I said, from the lefty to righty side of things. Righties are typically lower to mid, and if we can get more, we will. But lefties, we can go with a little less, depending upon what their stuff's like, and kind of go from there. And the lefty side of things, there's just not many quality left-handed pitchers at lower levels. If you're a high level left-handed pitcher in high school, again, you're probably going to be looking at potentially some scholarship money to go play somewhere. So for us to be able to get a quality left-handed arm that we think can project out and develop, that's pretty attractive to us.
Yeah, so that's what you're going to see, or that's what you're looking for when you're recruiting. What about in-game arms? I mean, you guys have had some studs there. So that you're going to see some really good velo at that level.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the guys that we're facing within our conference has such a tradition for being a good baseball conference, and with the strength of schedule that we play, we're seeing some really good arms. There's quite a few guys who will be in the mid to upper 80s and even in the low 9s that we'll see on a pretty consistent basis. The 90 side of things is not as frequent, but I think if you talk to any hitter, would you rather see 92 that's straight or the 87 that's got some run and sink to it? I think they're going to say they'd rather see the 92 and straight. So it's more so just about the pitchability, being able to move the ball in and out, change pace, throw 2-0 breaking balls, 1-1 change ups, those types of things. So pitching at our level is really a complete thing. It's not just the velocity. It's about the ability to be able to throw multiple pitches in multiple counts. But I think, we've seen some pretty good arms over the course of the last few years, especially as you get later into the year. You're going to see some high velo guys. There have been draft picks from our conference, and we feel like the current staff that we have right now has been or is one of the harder throwing staffs that we've had, over the course of the last few years.
Sure. What about metrics? I know nowadays with like PBR and the perfect game, a lot of events, you're getting spin rate, you're getting all the standard Rapsodo metrics from pitchers when they're sending stuff in. Are there particular metrics that you guys are interested in that you've seen? Hey, this works well for our guys in house. If we recruit this, some of these numbers we think can play.
Yeah, and it's become much more prevalent the past few years, just with facilities having a lot more access to this type of data, showcases that are having this type of stuff recorded as part of what kids are getting evaluated on. It's helpful to us, but it's not necessarily something that will deter us from recruiting a player. Obviously the spin rate on certain pitches is something that we can kind of see immediate feedback on. It's more for us. It's more just a tracer to see if this player's in our program, what kind of the route for us to help them develop would be. If they're a high spin guy, what we're going to do with them here. If they're a lower spin guy, then maybe we got to work on a little bit more of a two seam and have some sync to what it is that they're doing. It's if a kid can pitch and he's an 84 to 86 mile an hour arm, but he's a low spin rate guy, that's still a guy that we're going to recruit. But it just tells us that when he gets in our program, these are some things that we may look at to help him have a little bit more success at the next level. And I think that's one of the things too that we discuss with kids is if we're recruiting you, it's because we think that your skill set is going to be successful. We're not big proponents of, we're recruiting you because we're going to get you in here and do this with you. We're not looking to change swings or arm actions. If we're going to do that, then we probably shouldn't be recruiting you. So we recruit the guys that we think have skills that will transition to the next level. And if we have to make some small adjustments and kind of nudge them in a certain way to get them to be successful, we'll do what we can. But we're not talking about major overhauls. But from the number side of things, it doesn't necessarily, like I said, deter us from recruiting kids, but more so just, okay, if this guy, decides to come to Marietta College, this is kind of the idea and the route that we're going to take to hopefully, make him as the most successful player that he can be.
You feel like guys are a little bit more educated nowadays coming in? They know some of this metrics. They know a little bit more about themselves, their arsenal, kind of what they can and can't do, as opposed to maybe some in the years past where guys come in and they're just kind of learning some of that.
It's funny to me. I think it's kind of a 50-50 split, and you can get a pretty good sense of it through the recruiting process with where the kids fall on either side of the fence. But we've had guys who, are pretty big numbers guys that look at the Rapsodo data pretty regularly, and they've got a good grasp on what it is that they're doing. And it's more so just they're a product of their environment, right? If it was a big part of their high school program or a big part of their summer program or a winter facility that they worked out at, they've obviously got more of a knowledge on what those numbers mean and how they can apply those to be successful. But then there's other times where, we have guys who could care less. It's more so about what they do with the hitter, how the ball's
give me the ball,
strictly feel. And it's on me, honestly, to be able to juggle that and be able to communicate with each player in a different way. So like I said, there are some guys who really value that, and then there are other guys who understand it and know kind of how it can help them, but it's not necessarily a pivotal focus for them. And I think our guys have done a really good job of that the past few years of understanding, because we do have Rapsodo from the pitching side of things, of how, this is what your numbers are. This is how, making slight adjustments or certain things, this is how it can help you. But at the end of the day, it's still about you and the guy in the batter's box. So I think they've kind of towed that line really well. It doesn't necessarily matter to us if your slider picks up another 300 to 400 RPMs if it ends up being in the left-handed batter's box, right? It's got to be able to still be a strike and get outs. So like I said, I think our guys have done well with that balance.
From the statistical side, a lot of parents get real excited about the stats, high school baseball stats, maybe summer league, Legion stats, stuff like that. Can you talk about the importance of stats, or maybe some specific stats that you actually do consider important and kind of look at when you're evaluating?
Yeah. And honestly, when it comes to stats from the high school side of things, we don't put a ton of stock in it. Because there's a lot of 400 high school hitters that sometimes never see the field at the next level or don't have a lot of success. We will look at it. It obviously it leaves a little bit of an impression, but it's not something we will not solely recruit somebody based off of their stats or their video. We want to see them in person. We want to see them play, and I think we might be a little bit different than some places when it comes to this philosophy. You can get burned. You can get burned from video pretty easily, right? Or stats, right? It's kind of like the social media side of things. You're only putting out there what you want people to see, right? So, we want to see more how you interact on the field. Do you play fast? Do you play hard? Do you take dirt ball reads if you're on base, right? Are you pitching and actually understanding how to sequence? Are you reading swings as a catcher when you're calling games? It's kind of those things that are between the lines a little bit. So while stats are good and they can be an indicator for if a player is talented and enough to be successful at the next level, we don't necessarily recruit guys just based off of it. We want to see
on the mound. Are there any pitching stats that stand out to you?
Strike percentage is obviously pretty important. To just the sheer ability to be in the zone on a consistent basis. If you can't throw strikes at the high school level, you're probably not going to be successful at the next level. For us at the college level, we do track quite a bit. We're looking at strike percentages by pitch, so fastball, curveball, slider, changeup, et cetera, what guys throw. So we're tracking those strike percentages, and then also swing and miss percentages on those pitches. And again, it's more so for us to create a game plan with what you can be successful with, right? So if Marty Davis is on the mound and his fastball, he's able to throw it at 67% for a strike, and he's getting a swing and miss on it, 6% of the time, but you've got a changeup that you're throwing for 50%, strikes, but your swing and miss percentage on that is 23, right? It gives us a little bit of an idea and game plan as to when we get into certain counts, what we're going to be successful with, what we go to. And there's a little bit of a learning curve with that in the fall too. Our catchers will call games in the fall. And after an at bat or after an inning, I'll kind of talk with them about, and the pitcher for that matter, with why do we call this in this certain situation? And it's more so just to get them to understand what's going on in the game. And ultimately, it falls on the pitcher. He has to be able to throw what he wants to throw. But it gives us a game plan, right? If you're not getting swings and misses with your fastball, we probably shouldn't be throwing that a ton in a 2-strike count unless you're just completely blowing the doors off the guy, right? So there's wiggle room with all of this stuff. So we'll track strike percentages, swing and miss percentages, opponent's average. I think is a pretty decent indicator, of how well guys are able to pitch to weak contact, and then whip as well. Whip is another one that we look at quite a bit, just on how much traffic are you having on the bases. Are you able to control the running game? Or if guys get on first base, are you able to keep them at first base?
Yeah, if you're getting hit and walks are totaling up, then that doesn't bode well at the next level. If you can't do that at the high school level,
it's pretty easy to see, right? It's pretty easy to see if you look at, when we track our guys, the guys who have the higher strike percentages, and we don't necessarily put a ton of stock into creating swing and miss stuff. If we can work on your pitches and just tweak some things here and there, we'll start to see those things go up. But we don't really have a focus on trying to strike guys out. It's about more team defense, efficiency, getting the ball in play, having guys make plays behind you. If those things come, and we've had some guys who have had some good pitches that have had swing and miss percentages in the 20 and 30%, and I think at our level, I think that's pretty good. But we don't necessarily try to chase it. It's about being able to create weak contact early on, I guess, and a kind of perfect segue into it. One of the things that I will track is a guy's ability to get the first batter out that they face. So a percentage of that. So if it's a bullpen guy coming in, how much success has he had with being able to get the first guy out that he faces. And then also we'll track 4 pitches or less. So if a percentage of how many batters you're able to get in and out of the batter's box in 4 pitches or less. I don't count 4-pitch walks in that as well. That doesn't win you any points. But I don't penalize guys for hit by pitches. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is being able to get to the inside third of the plate. You have to be able to do it at this level. I think Freddie Freeman was talking about it the other day, or maybe it was a few weeks ago during the All-Star break. There was something I saw on social media about how he's basically trying to take away the middle outer third. If a pitcher dots the inside third, tip your cap, he's probably not going to be able to do it 3 times. So, and that's somebody who's had a lot of success at the highest level of the game, and he's basically taking the inside pitch, right? So if we can have control of the inside third, we're probably going to have a lot of success at our level. So I don't penalize guys for hit by pitches when it comes to the 4 pitches or less. If they go in there and they plunk a guy because they're trying to get in there, obviously I'm not the happiest person, but we'll try to learn from it and move on. At the end of the day, I'm okay with the aggressiveness. I guess as I'm talking about this out loud, I should probably look at if we're hitting guys with breaking balls that back up on them. That maybe that shouldn't count.
So what about development? You get a guy that comes in, he's got a bag full of plyos. You got another guy, he's got a connect ball from a Texas baseball ranch, and then you got somebody else with a different philosophy. How do you put all that together when guys show up on campus?
Yeah, it's and I think first and foremost, like when we have guys get on campus from the pitching side of things, if they do have specific routines like that they've used in the past, I just want them to disclose that with me, right? Talk with me. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And I think that's the kicker for a lot of kids is, why are you doing this? Because there's
they
a lot of
don't have any idea.
No idea. They have no idea because they went to some program and their parents paid for them to be there, and that's just what they do. And there's nothing wrong. It may work for them. There's nothing wrong with that. But why are you doing it is a pretty serious question that most players should understand, right? If you're a hitter and you show up in the cage every day and you just do a routine that you've done for years, it's like, well, why is this actually preparing you for what it is that you're trying to do? So the why of what you're doing is pretty important when we talk about, pregame routines, pre-throw routines. Does it get your body mentally and physically right to be able to be successful on the mound? So we don't necessarily say, hey, this is exactly what we're doing. You have to do it our way. I mean, if kids have programs and plyo routines and different stuff that they've incorporated in their routines in the past, I'm perfectly fine with that, as long as we can have that conversation as to what it is, why you're doing it, and then finding the way to fit it in with what it is that we do from the developmental side of things. And again, there's some guys, it's becoming more and more prevalent. There's quite a few guys now who are showing up on campus who have a plyo routine that they like. And again, like I said, we have no problem with it.
You've been coaching for a while. Any good recruiting stories that you can share publicly that comes to mind?
Good stories that come to mind.
Maybe a good travel story, or
there's one that comes to mind, but I can't take credit for it. It was actually Coach Langley's, but I guess he wouldn't be upset if I told it. So
yeah, go ahead, share.
This predated me being at Marietta. We had a kid who graduated in 2022. His name was Alex Page, and
you're throwing out names.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
I hope he sees it. He'll like it. He'll enjoy it. It's not a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. Right. So we at Marietta we're a little bit more old school with the clean cut, clean shaven, and this is probably going to go here in a couple of days once kids get back on campus. But Alex was a kid in the recruiting process who had the long flowing hair. It was down to his shoulders. Sunshine, if you will, from
yeah.
Blank, and it's embarrassing. I can't think of the football movie, but he had the hair like that. So in the recruiting, and we tell all the kids in the recruiting process, this is what it is. This is kind of what our standards are. So fast forward a few weeks, we're playing a road game at Wilmington College, and Alex was fairly close to Wilmington from where he lived in Cincinnati, and came to watch us play. And Coach Langley tells, in between double headers, he was running to the bathroom, and Alex was there. And I think Alex was trying to acknowledge him and say hello, but Coach Langley walked right past him. He didn't even recognize him. So Coach Langley comes back from the bathroom, catches him. Oh, I didn't see you there. I'm sorry. And Alex had his hair cut, and
let's go.
Talking to him, and Coach Langley says, so is this, jokingly, is this your way of telling us you're coming to Marietta College? And Alex says, yeah, actually it is. So he had cut his hair.
Oh, that's awesome.
To come to Marietta College. So that I'm sure there are some others that I'm forgetting, but that was kind of the first one that
you talk about a public making a commitment. That's a commitment, right?
Yeah, it is. So
that's awesome. So
most of it is just the kids calling and saying they're coming, but that was kind of a cool situation.
Yeah. So a lot of options, right, for guys nowadays. Why Marietta College?
It's an awesome question. It really is. And I would say, the message continues to be, you're going to have an opportunity to get a great education at a college that cares for your success. There's plenty of people. That's the difference at Marietta, I think, compared to a lot of places that I've been and seen, is the people here make the place. There are a lot of very good people at Marietta that care for our students, that are going to be there for them at whatever time they need them to be. So you're going to get a phenomenal experience as a student, great education, and you're going to have a chance to compete for a national championship. Our goal for every player that comes through our program is that you're graduating in 4 years with a degree that's going to set you up for life, and hopefully you're doing it with a couple of rings on your hand along the way. That to me, that's what makes this place special, is the best of both worlds at such a high level. And hopefully that's very attractive to kids that want that type of experience.
Yeah, what a tradition. Mike Mulvey, pitching coach, Division III powerhouse, Marietta College. Appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely, Marty. I'm Marty. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.